Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Eagles podcast live at the NFL Combine. Bo Wulf, Zach Berman here. We just heard from Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman. We're going to talk about all the things we learned. This is a fun one because Zach and I haven't even discussed. We haven't even unpacked it off air. We left the press conferences, some of the little gaggles that happened afterwards, went to our respective hotel rooms, logged on. We're ready to talk, but we don't know what each other thinks about what we just heard from Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni. Zach, how are you?
Doing well. You took the words out of my mouth that I was going to say. What's interesting about this show is it's the first show, other than the post-game shows, when we haven't conversed before. So I don't know what's on your mind. You don't know what's on my mind. I hope it's not disorganized, but it's really going to be just like spilling our immediate thoughts. I haven't even had time to process what was said. And usually I like to think before I said, so this could be more akin to a post-game show than anything else. The other thing I want to point out, and longtime viewers of the show will appreciate this, is that when I came on, the first thing and actually when I checked into the hotel last night, the first thing I thought about is what's the backdrop going to be for the Tuesday show. And when I got here, I was focused on the backdrop. And Julia, our ace head of production at the company, she said to me, Zach, it's a nice backdrop, but the lighting's not good. So can you? So I said I was focusing on this backdrop, and she said to me, what you should focus on is the lighting, but you can spin the laptop at the beginning of the show to show what the backdrop would have been. So for the viewers here, I was going to give a little picturesque
what
view
a backdrop
of Indianapolis, and now you have
nothing could possibly compare to that skyline.
Well, I was trying to give this picturesque view of this isn't quite Market Square, but this is downtown Indianapolis. And instead,
the more important view has already been commented on by the commenters. We got a super chat from Real Time who says Zach Berman with the Travis Kelce cut, sexy.
I don't think it's the Travis Kelce cut. I think it's just
you think Travis calls it the Zach Berman cut?
No. Actually, this was a big controversy during the Super Bowl week, if you recall. That I think the New York Times had a story about Travis Kelce's haircut being a trend, and like it's been a popular cut in different communities for years, right? And so Travis Kelce can't necessarily claim credit for it.
Okay, well there you go. All right, Zach, we will get into everything, and I think there are some things that sort of change the way I feel about the offseason ahead. Most of it, I think, is either a sell job or what we would have expected. There is one thing in particular that is actually kind of a bit of a red flag in my mind that we heard. But I want to know the number one takeaway you have and that I have, because I imagine they're different. But there's one thing that to me was one of the funniest things that I've heard said in one of these situations.
So number one takeaway for here, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you one for like the offseason and one for like what's happened during these past few weeks.
What's the answer? What's the answer that you will remember 5 years from now?
The answer I'll remember I'll remember all the answers 5 years from now.
Okay.
But the answer that I will remember most, here, I'm going to give you a quick Nick, my big takeaway from Nick and my big takeaway from Howie. Okay, my big takeaway from Nick is that he doesn't view the offense as the problem. That this is an offense that a year ago was like setting records in Philadelphia, that they didn't need to turn over their offensive staff because this is the Philadelphia Eagles offense. So they're going to put together their concepts with Kellen Moore's concepts. And like the defense, Vic Fangio needed his guys on defense, but offense, this is the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And there's a little bit of a defensiveness about like suggestions about the offense, about Jalen Hurts or the offense. I think he was trying to reinforce that this is an offense that was setting records, and this is an offense that was a big deal in Philly, right? So that was my big Nick Sirianni takeaway. My Howie Roseman
takeaway.
Okay,
let's get into this actually. Let's save Howie because and
is that something you agree with?
Yes, and I'm going to
Okay.
save this silly thing that really made my ears perk up and that I will remember. We'll get to that. That's a little bit of a tease, as Zach likes to say. I absolutely got the sense from several answers that like Nick Sirianni doesn't really think he did much wrong and isn't really prepared to change what he does. I mean, some of the messaging is exactly the same. And I know there was a comment in here before, like, I'm getting tired about hearing about the core values. Well, like, guess what? Those aren't going away. And doubling down on what we know to be true. And the one thing we learned today is that apparently there are 2 of the 5 core values that are a little bit more important. For a while, it was they are all equally important and the order doesn't matter. But now it's actually connect and accountability are the 2 that stand above the rest. Over the other
compete just got a high billing because it begins with a C.
So right, exactly.
Connect and compete.
Accountability starts with an A, but
connect and compete sound good together. That's what he said.
And by the way, if you were to like unpack what happened at the end of the season, arguably accountability and connection were 2 of the things like that they failed at more than the others. All of that said, the way that he talks about the offense, 1 year removed from the best offense in Eagles history, the way he talks about AJ Brown, I do not get the sense that he had some, got some time away, had some come to Jesus moment about like, there are a lot of things that we need to change about the offense. If you were expecting and probably it would have been naive to expect this, but if you were expecting a different Nick Sirianni, like with a different plan of attack on how to coach the football team, I think you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I think that his takeaway is that the defense sucked, right? I think that's how he viewed how the season went, and that look, we're bringing in Vic Fangio. This guy has so much experience. Vic Fangio has his guys on defense. They're going to make some personnel changes on defense, and that ties into what Howie said.
And obviously, I disagree with that. Like, of course, the defense sucked, but for the offense to finish 10th with the health that they got and the talent that they have was an absolute failure. And like to puff your chest out about like, we were really good in some categories. Like, I'm sorry, that is not good enough. And the path for this team forward is to be a top 3, top 5 offense. And they absolutely underperformed last year.
Yeah, I think that they would agree with that they underperformed. But I think they view it like, well, the players who are there when they set all these records are still in place, that the coaches who help build that offense are mostly still in place. Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson, and then Alex Tandy aren't here. But other than that, like Jeff Stoutland and Kevin Patullo, you hear Kevin Patullo's name a lot. Kevin Patullo is a big part of this operation, right? And I think that they basically want Kellen Moore to take what they had and add a little flavor to it. But I don't think this is, and I said this on the show and I still stand by it. You don't hire Kellen Moore not to run Kellen Moore's offense. But I will admit that my antenna's up about a 2020 situation where it was like they brought in Scangarello to bring in these different ideas. And then they got to a point where Doug is like, wait, no, I want a Super Bowl with my ideas. We don't need your ideas. And I actually don't know if Doug said that, but I think that was kind of I think there was that 2020 season. It was like, there's what they wanted to do, what they knew they could do. And those 2 things couldn't butt heads or those 2 things couldn't mesh. And I think they're really hoping for a meshing here of what they did the first 2 years. Well, in particular, what they did in 2022 and then what Kellen Moore is bringing in.
So here's the actual thing. All of that stuff is like, that's just Nick, right? He's not going to necessarily change who he is. And all of what we're talking about today is like parsing answers from a press conference when people are just speaking extemporaneously. It doesn't necessarily mean a ton. But the one thing to me that was an actual red flag as they move forward and build out this roster moving ahead is Howie Roseman. I asked him the question about, like, you've had the luxury of not needing your rookies to play a ton over the past couple of years because of the strength of the roster. Has that affected your ability to like self-scout guys, to really have the information? And he said, like, as we move forward, I have talked about this. Coach and I have talked about this. Like, we're going to have to play the young guys, and there are going to be some times when it's a little bit uncomfortable, just looking at the depth chart because a guy hasn't proven it. But like, in service of what is best for the team, we're going to have to play the young guys. And this is the conversation that we have been having over the past month or so. Like, at some point, those reps matter more. Like, it would have been better for the December Eagles if Sidney Brown got starters reps in September as opposed to having to wait so long.
Which we spoke about in September.
Which we spoke about. Yeah, of course. That was not a big surprise.
Yeah.
But that's a real thing. Like, they need to, at some point, they need to let the young guys play. And then Nick was asked about that. And he gave the exact same answer that he gave last year and the year before. Like, the age doesn't matter. I'm going to play whoever gives us the best chance to win that week. And that is the coach's, that is always going to be the coach's bias, is who is the most dependable, who is the most reliable. And that's how you get Justin Evans starting 4 games. And Justin Evans was fine. He wasn't, they won those games, right? But it was the way that Howie talked about it, as if this was a conversation they've had. They have had like this agreement on, at some point, we got to turn the roster over. And Nick was like, he just wasn't a part of that conversation, or he doesn't agree with that. That to me was like, oh, maybe there is a bit of a disconnect here at this thing that is going to be very important as they flip this roster forward.
Well, I agree with you. But interestingly, between the two of us, you usually accuse me, or the audience accuses me of kind of defending Howie in this. And maybe I'll push back on Howie. I agree with the premise of what you're saying. They do need to play young guys, but the easiest thing for a GM to do in like defending his record, if you will, like passively defending his record, is, well, the coach didn't play my guys. Like, these picks, right? I mean, perhaps the coaches didn't play them because the guys weren't ready to play, right? And this goes into what you were saying about whether it's Nolan Smith or Sidney Brown. I agree. You do have to play these players. And we shouted out Tommy Lawler earlier this offseason when he spoke about the Chiefs defense. And like, they played these guys, they took their lumps, and then when it came to money time, these guys were ready. That said, maybe those guys were better players, and that's what you have to determine. So, I agree with Howie in this, is that, of course, Sidney Brown should be playing over Justin Evans. We were saying that last year, and Nolan Smith should be getting reps, right? You need to know who these guys are.
That was one that he specifically mentioned, yes.
Yeah, and that, like, Tyler Steen should be playing over Sua Opeta, right? Like these are all things that we've discussed a number of times, rather. But I will emphasize this is that it's very easy for Howie to say,
that's a good point.
Like my guys, or my draft picks just haven't had the opportunity, right? Like, the jury's still out on Nakobe Dean, right? Or the jury's still out on Nolan Smith, or the jury's still out, you go on down the list. But
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, at some point, you can't keep playing these patchwork players on 1-year deals. If you have high draft picks, you got to play high draft picks. And, or even if you have mid-round, like, you draft a guy in the first 3 rounds to be a starter or a contributing player for you. And you just, you need to throw them in the water to see what they can do. And right, I do believe they're going to do that this year. And I don't think, I think between those two conversations, I think Howie's going to win that one, because
probably so, but it's one to bookmark for week 1 and week 2.
Yeah. Well, because I also think Howie could force the issue, in that Howie could say, like, I'm not giving you your Justin Evanses this year, right? Howie always likes to have insurance, but it could be like they did a linebacker last year.
He's not going to submarine his own roster. I mean, you need.
I agree with that. But you look at linebacker last year, like, they deliberately did not sign someone over Nakobe Dean. They were like, Nakobe Dean's going to play. Now Nakobe Dean, he ended up getting hurt, and then the depth was an issue. But pick, if if Jason Kelce retires, okay, they could very well say, like, this is your center and this is your right guard, right? We drafted these guys 2nd round, 3rd round. Like, these guys are going to play. They could very well say safety, it's a different story, because if Sidney Brown was coming back healthy, then I think you could say Sidney Brown's going to start. But Sidney Brown might not, he might not be healthy. But they might very well do that at cornerback with Keely Ringo. They might say, I'm not giving you someone better than Keely Ringo, unless it's a Snead or someone who's like a blue chip player. I'm not giving you that 1 year Steven Nelson. You're going to play Keely Ringo, and Keely Ringo is going to take his lumps. So they very well could do that.
The thing that Nick said, that is the one thing that I will remember from this press conference, is when he was asked about Jalen Hurts' leadership. And Zach, he said, there's no book written about this is how you lead. And
I've read 1,000 books like that.
It's hard to imagine a topic that has had more books written about it than leadership. Like,
that's, I think, so what he meant is
I wrote in my notes, not a book written about this is how you lead, LOL.
Yeah, I would say to Nick, my backpack wasn't there when I did it, but I would say, Nick, here I have my iPad, I have a Kindle profile here, and I could give you like 20 books in here about leadership. But
what's your favorite leadership book, Zach?
I would say Leaders Eat Last, maybe.
Wow, opposite contra Roger Goodell. Famous Roger Goodell story. Wouldn't let the warm pizza sit there. Nope. Everybody was afraid to eat until he took a slice himself.
There's I don't know. There's a bunch of Jim Collins books that you can look at. I would say there's a number. I mean, you're gonna laugh when I say this. There's a lot of like Malcolm Gladwell concepts that I'll probably apply to this, but maybe Good to Great stands out. How about, you know what? I'm gonna give a shout out to the Covey family. Right? I mean, those are characteristics that leaderships have. But let's pause. I think what Nick meant is that there's no one way. There's no book that says this is how you have to lead. I think
there is probably literally a book that has that title, but yes.
No, because I think he meant that there's not a book on like this is how you lead.
Is no. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
but I mean,
that's what he meant.
We can say that was very funny.
Yes, true. But I thought the funny thing was the funniest thing for me with Nick was
there is no book written about how to cook something.
No, when he said after all, it's what you mentioned a few minutes ago. After all these years, the core values, they're all important, but there's actually two that are most important.
Yeah,
it's really connecting accountability. But man, he loves telling us about the core values.
What did you think about what he said about Jalen?
I think he's right. I think that.
Well, tell the listeners what he said, because we had a discussion yesterday about whether he was going to put anything on Jalen or he was going to.
Yeah, so it's similar to what he said. He said like Jalen has his own unique leadership style, and I should say right now I'm not quoting anyone verbatim because I haven't listened through yet. I listen, and in a press conference I'm like taking notes. Here it's hard to take notes because you can't really hear everything when you're at the combine because questions are shouted. They're at a little bit of a distance. So you have to kind of piece together some of the things. But what he was saying about Jalen was that Jalen has his style. There's no one way to do this, and that Jalen kind of has to lead his way. And this is in response to the speculation, like we said yesterday, that as has been reported, he needs to be more vocal. And I can imagine they're having those conversations behind the scenes because I know Mike Garafolo. Mike Garafolo is an outstanding reporter and would not report something that he doesn't have like ironclad. And so I think these conversations are being had. But to the point when we talked about this with Les, I don't think Nick's ever going to throw his quarterback under the bus. Or I don't think he's going to like remotely be critical of his quarterback. And
I also think that well, go ahead.
No, he's repeatedly, and this happened in the Seattle game. Like he will stand up for his quarterback to the point of where it's indefatigable in his approach.
I believe that Mike's report that the conversation in the building has been about Jalen's leadership style reflects much worse on the organization than it does Jalen. Like, even if that is a thing that they think needs to be tweaked, like, I'm sorry. For them to be pointing the finger at Jalen Hurts' leadership style after everything that went down is like, it's so passing the buck that it's, I think, unbecoming.
I want to clarify. Matt H said, Zach, that's the opposite of what you said yesterday. That's what Bo was saying. When we were doing that game yesterday, it was about Howie Roseman. And I think Howie Roseman might have answered that question a little bit differently.
I totally disagree.
Okay.
You think Howie would have put something on Jalen?
Not necessarily on Jalen, but I think it would have been. You have to remember, this is a 25-year-old who's like, still growing, still maturing. Like he said today, Jalen has all the traits that you want in a quarterback, and I do believe that they think that. But I think Howie's more coded in his answer sometimes than, or I think there's often with Howie you can read between the lines more than with Nick. I think Nick is very literal.
Yeah, I think that Howie would have gone out of his way to say nothing but nice things about Jalen.
No, nice things, but leaving open the door that Peyton Manning was different when he was 30 than, or Tom Brady was different when he was 30 than when he was 25, right? Quarterbacks
I don't think so.
Grow, quarterbacks evolve. I wouldn't put that out. I wouldn't put it out of the question that he would.
There's for him there was
perhaps
nothing
we should have
to
asked
be gained
that.
by that.
Howie was like 12 minutes today. I only got one question in, and it was the question that I had been saying I wanted to ask about the aberration, right? So we didn't get much on Jalen from Howie. There was I didn't hear what the question was, but I think it was a general quarterback development question that Howie kind of talked about Jalen's traits. But so that answer came up with Sirianni, did not necessarily come up with Howie.
Okay, let's save Howie for a little bit. Is there anything else from Nick that you would like to unpack?
Yeah. So, as I said, the defensive staff, and I'm answering this directly because this was a question that I asked, which was the experience on the staff. And he didn't talk about the experience of the coaches, although he said they needed to give Vic Fangio his guys, which he admitted, which we didn't do with Sean last year. Like he literally said that, and they didn't do that. They gave Sean Desai one guy, and that was the nickel coach, Ronell Williams, right? And they very much, like DK McDonald was the D-backs coach, and that was Nick's guy. And DJ Elliott, they did that comprehensive search of like 20 guys, and Nick hired him, right? Vic Fangio hired his assistants here. That's very clear. All three levels are Vic Fangio guys. When I asked about the experience on the staff, he actually focused on Vic Fangio's experience, saying like Jonathan Gannon was a first-year coordinator. Sean Desai was a young coordinator. Now they have a guy who, when he first came to the combine was in New Orleans, right? Like that's how old Vic Fangio is, and he's really looking forward to having that experience. And so that was the approach that he took. And then so that's one thing that stood out. His defense of AJ Brown, and I agree with Nick. This is actually what I said in my tweet the other day. He said AJ Brown's the best receiver who's ever played in Philadelphia. Which, like, if you look at the first 2 years, he has the two best. Now it's 17 game seasons, but still, he is statistically the two best seasons of a wide receiver in NFL history, in Eagles history rather. And so he said that AJ has some
pretty good. I had some pretty good bubble ball receivers back in the day. But
yeah, there's a reason why AJ wears the C on his chest. All this, like AJ, very vociferous defensive AJ, and I think they genuinely believe that. I think that the attributes or like the problems that have been assigned to AJ, I think they view that as more external news than anything else. I genuinely don't think that's coming from the team. I think the Jalen stuff, I think that's coming from the team. I don't think any of this AJ. I think the AJ stuff is just like media created. People reading into answers. People, I don't think the team has this big issue with AJ. And then he wasn't asked directly about this, but look, there was a column in the Inquirer today about from Marcus Hayes that he coached like the star players differently than the other people. And Nick said today that he specifically said you have to coach everyone different. There's one standard, but you coach everyone different. And by the way, I should have brought this up to Nick afterwards when I was
imagine trying to coach Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis the same way.
Yeah,
it's so stupid.
But Mitch Albom wrote a book on the Fab Five, and I wonder if Nick read that book. Like it's one of the first like big sports books I read. But I specifically remember Steve Fisher saying that you don't coach everyone the same way. Like that was a big emphasis that he had there. That you treat everyone with respect, but you don't. But you there's different styles that you coach Jalen Rose different than you coach Chris Webber, than you coach Juwan Howard, like so on and so forth. So yeah, that is absolutely the case. And I see, Bill Parcells said you treat everyone fairly, but not the same. So look, I mean, I don't doubt that people in the locker room might say, like, are they holding player X accountable? Are they holding player Y accountable? But I don't think Nick Sirianni is doing anything that other coaches aren't doing in that regard. So I think that was an intentional framing that he did there. The
Tuesdays with Jimmy, was that what it was called?
Tuesday? No, it was called the Fab Five. The book was called the Fab Five. And then there was a book, Parcells. Actually, my wife got it for me for Valentine's Day in 2014 or 2015 rather. I read it in a weekend. Awesome book.
Would you like to share the significance of this week 10 years later?
I mean, if you want me to. 10 years ago on Sunday night, I came back from the combine and I got a message. I got back to my apartment in Philly and I opened my phone or my computer, I think. And I got a message from
message.
Yeah, it was on Facebook.
Wow.
And it was a message from my now wife, who then was just a woman I was very interested in, right?
Sliding into your DMs.
Well, it was, I mean, I don't need to get into the whole story, but like I mean, I was very interested in her. But yeah, that was 10 years ago on Sunday. So the combine, I always remember, I remember being a single guy at that combine, my second year on the beat, and then never been a single guy since. So,
wow. Watch out, ladies of Indianapolis back then.
I wouldn't say that, but I mean,
she got it in just ahead of free agency. Yeah, she put in her, as they're saying in the comments, she got her bid in. Talk to your agent.
She got her bid in. And I always joke it's a good thing we started dating during the offseason, because if we start dating during the season, there's no way I'd be married to her, because she would be like, why isn't this guy ever available? Why is this guy canceling all these dates?
Well, yeah, you just wouldn't have been dating. You wouldn't even have started dating.
Yeah. Every potential relationship that was in the fall didn't materialize because I'm married to football. There's a sign in our living room at home. There's a sign in our living room at home that we got as an anniversary present.
Is it like this family is interrupted for football season?
Yeah, we interrupt this marriage for football season. That's what it says. We interrupt this marriage for football season, and that's and it has top billing and on a shelf in our house, and it is so true. I remember my Aunt Eileen got it for us when I got engaged, and it is so true. So,
well, there you go. All right, before we move on to Howie Roseman and what else he said today at the Combine, let's talk about Empire Today, because with Empire Today, you get shop-at-home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and that price match guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring, so of course they have copycats, but those copycats, they cannot beat Empire Today when it comes to quality, service, speed. So they're going to advertise low-quality products that Empire Today, they're not even going to carry those garbanzo beans products, okay? Empire Today will not promise the lowest prices because anybody who does that is putting flooring in your home that they wouldn't even put in their worst enemies, okay? So, schedule a free in-home estimate today. If you're looking for new flooring, all listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code PHLY. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/PHLY for details. Go to Empire Today today.
And let me tell you about Game Time. I was at the bar last night, and there was a person sitting in a seat and turns around to me and says, "Were you at the game?" The game meaning the Pacers game. And I said, "No, I was not." But I didn't tell him this. Had I gone to the game, the only place I would have gotten tickets was Game Time. And the reason is because buying tickets to your favorite event should not be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals and last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You could stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. They have flash deals and last-minute tickets. Easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area with image of seat views and the lowest price guaranteed with event cancellation protection and job loss protection. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. And you can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And what is also awesome about it is they have the Game Time guarantee, which means you always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time credits you 110% of your difference, of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, Zach, before we get to the big picture Howie Roseman takeaways, I want you to give us the news on a couple of players of interest that Howie Roseman talked to us about, starting with Hassan Reddick. What did Howie Roseman say about Hassan Reddick?
Yeah, with Hassan Reddick, they love the player, a local guy. He's been really productive for them, but this is kind of going to be about what the price is, right? And this is nothing about the player himself, but I mean, my interpretation is this is going to be dictated by the market. In other words, and Howie didn't say this. He said what I just said, that they need to see what happens here. But my interpretation is if the market suggests that Hassan Reddick's worth X and the Eagles aren't going to pay X, then he'll be free to be traded, basically, or like they'll look to trade him. That they have a number essentially. So that's what stood out to me about Howie's remarks there, is that he didn't deny the fact that there's a negotiation going on here.
Okay. Next up, James Bradberry.
Yeah, he said James Bradberry's under contract. He's on the team. And when they say that, that's like on the team right now, right? I think that they have a cap obligation here. They know what the cap obligation here. He said,
go ahead.
Yeah, he said that they view him as an outside corner. They probably weren't prepared last year well enough to play nickel. And they had to move Bradberry in, but that he's under contract and like they owe him a lot of money, and this is kind of part of the equation.
It felt a little bit more open to bringing him back than I might have expected, actually. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I got. I think that they are looking at it in this perspective. They're going to have to pay him, or he's going to take a chunk of their cap space no matter what. You can do the post-June 1st cut and you split it over 2 years, but it's not as if he's not eating up your cap space. So you can look at it and say he has this, it's what, $9 million guaranteed, I believe it is. So if you're guaranteeing him this money, it behooves you to kind of, see what, I mean, perhaps in a different defense, perhaps it's his on again, off again year. He had a down year with Giants, comes back, has a really good year with the Eagles. Then he has a down year again. Perhaps he's up again. I don't think they anticipated the age curve hitting him as hard as it did last year at 29. So yeah, I think they would if you gave them truth serum, like if you were talking to them, just the two of us and Howie at the bar over some Miller Lite. I think we
Nice,
would.
good plug.
Yeah, I had to be
He
careful
would
there, right?
he would be worried about whether we spiked it or not.
over some Miller Lite. Then maybe he would say to us, like, when we signed him, we didn't expect it to look like that. But I think that they know they're paying him, and so they have to figure out if the fact that they're paying him, if they'll just eat that money and think that roster spot's more valuable, or they bring him back and try to salvage him and not necessarily plan on him looking like James Bradbury, but if he does, that's a bonus.
All right, last two, Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox.
Yeah, good question by you. I'm glad you snuck that in. Good job at the question face-off there. You came armed and ready. You were better than me today. You projected well,
but that was one that just needed to be
No.
asked on the record, I thought.
Yeah, you projected well. I think.
Sometimes you ask a question for yourself. Sometimes you ask a question for the Eagles sphere.
Yeah, like I vividly remember the week 1 press conference when you were trying to get in that Gannon question.
Yeah, I'm still mad about that to be frank.
Yeah.
Martin
I hear
Frank.
you there. I hear you there. So he said that, look, those are all-time Eagles. What you don't want is them to play in another jersey. If they want to come back, they'll be back. Basically saying it's their decision. This isn't a matter of money. Now, that's interesting with Fletcher Cox because Fletcher Cox
he was a little bit
before.
surprising to me. Yes, I thought that was a little bit interesting.
Fletcher Cox has been a little. Fletcher Cox. I mean, that's clearly the case.
He's given away his negotiating power with Fletcher Cox if Fletcher Cox wants to play.
Which makes me think that they have a sense of Fletcher's situation, right? I don't think. I think they're anticipating a retirement or Fletcher not being back. Yeah. And you don't want to, I don't think Howie ever wants to be. And look, I know, from talking to a lot of people that, Joe Banner, Joe Banner probably doesn't like the way the Brian Dawkins thing was portrayed, but I think Howie doesn't want to be the guy who lets Fletcher Cox finish his career in Pittsburgh, right? Or like the Jets or something like that. Unless
shot at Pittsburgh
at that play. Well, no, because it was close to going to Pittsburgh a few years ago. And then it was close to going to the Jets, I think a year ago. I don't think that I think Howie wants it to be like, if the player leaves, it's because the play, we want him back. I see Tim Williamson says Cox can join PHLY full time. Hey, I don't control the budget, but I would love to have Fletcher Cox on our show all the time. I think that would be like, if Fletcher Cox's post career is like in broadcasting, I would love Fletcher Cox to join us at PHLY.
Yeah. See, he can wear a different color with us. All right. Let's talk about what your other,
unless he just wears green, all the time. Right. It comes in the 91 jersey. Yeah.
There you go. All right. What else were your takeaways from Howie Roseman?
Yeah. So I think that they realized after they might have realized it in the moment, but I think when he looks back at the roster construction last year, and he said this, that they really wanted to invest a lot in, the offense. They want to have it, as you've talked about and you've been ahead of the curve on. Like, they think the way to win is this top 5 offense, and that they knew they were going to kind of take it on the chin on defense. I think when they realize now is that they let some good players out the door and they didn't adequately replace them, and that they need to do a better job with the defensive personnel. And so if I read between the lines there, I think the Eagles are going to be aggressive. And I don't think the Eagles are going to be aggressive in the patchwork solutions. I think the Eagles are going to be aggressive in like trying to find that 26-year-old safety or linebacker, trying to find what Rodney McLeod was, or trying to find, or maybe it's a blue chip player at corner. But I think they're going to look for a Rodney McLeod, or what when they signed Hassan Reddick. And that was a $15 million deal. That was a substantial deal. But I mean, that wasn't top of the market. But I think they're looking for that 2 to 3 year starter in free agency on defense. So I don't think it's going to kind of be the 1 year lottery ticket when I think they are going to try to make a splash, so to speak, for a core starter on defense. Do you disagree?
No, I think I do agree. And then I think this is rolled in with the salary cap stuff, which we can also talk about. But I want to ask you, I guess, where we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but like, is that more like that feels the way that he's talking about it a little bit more likely at linebacker? But I also, again, and I'm going through and I'm putting together this list for the site on like what I think the Eagles board is going to look like at free agency, right? And there are some attractive linebacker options, Frankie Louvu, Blake Cashman, Patrick Queen, if that's your type. I think
Patrick
he's a
Queen,
little bit
yeah.
not necessarily their type.
Okay.
And then there are guys like Willie Gay, who are passable but not necessarily like tentpole players. But at safety, there are some real guys at safety who are young. Like, Xavier McKinney is only 25 years old. Same for Cam Curl. There are a bunch of other safeties who are like 26, 27. And I don't know if I think safety makes more sense to me as like, let's sign a really good 29-year-old and hope to pass it on to Blankenship and Brown. Whereas linebacker is like, if we can sign a Frankie Louvu or a Blake Cashman, maybe that makes more sense. But at the same time, what are the odds that the Eagles are going to be the team in the market that pays the most for, one of the top two linebackers available?
Good point. But that's
then again, if it's
like
if L'Jarius Sneed sneaks through and gets on the market, like, would they be willing to be the team that pays the most for a 27-year-old premier corner? Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I think when Howie looks at his free agency hits, it's the Rodney McLeod, the Brandon Brooks. I would even put Javon Hargrave in there, right? The guys who
Javon
they
Hargrave
identified
is an enormous success.
Yeah. No, I'm saying Javon Hargrave was an expensive play like that. That was a big contract, but that's why that's a little different than McLeod. But he wasn't like the top guy. I'll give a shout out to Greg Rosenthal from NFL.com. I think Greg does a really good job on his free agency rankings. I'm always biased to when Shield did the rankings, but I
think Shield has rankings coming out, so now you're burying him for being late.
No. I mean, I haven't seen Shield's rankings yet, but I'm saying like I use Greg Rosenthal's rankings as like some of my, I think Greg does a really good job there. And so point being that I haven't gone back and looked, but I don't think like Javon Hargrave or Rodney McLeod or Brandon Brooks might have been like top 10 in those rankings, but they're players that the Eagles identified, and all the players were better in their second contracts than their first contracts, which is not often the case in free agency. So perhaps you're not playing the top of the market at the position. And when I look at, for instance,
Howie's track record in free agency is outstanding.
Yeah.
Compared to the rest of the league, most players who are signed to big deals do not work out very well.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, most of Howie's. It's hard for me to even think of a player he signed to a big deal in free agency who did not pan out.
So, but I bring this up because when you look at the safeties on the market, like you look at the top of, I mean, let's take away like the top 10 players on the list because a lot of those guys are tagged, like Antoine Winfield. But if you look at kind of like 11 to 25, there's some D backs in there, right? And those guys are really going to get paid, even like CJ Gardner-Johnson or Xavier McKinney or Kyle Duggar. But then when you look at like the linebackers from like 25 on, right? I mean, you mentioned Louvu. Queen's 28 on that list. Jordan Brooks is 38 on that list. There's
28.
What's that?
I see what you're saying.
Like Devin White, former All-Pro, is 70th on the list. Willie Gay is 85th on the list. And so maybe there's a guy who, I mean, Devin White wouldn't be an example of this, but someone like Willie Gay, maybe, who they say the second contract's going to be better than the first. This is a player who changes scenery, that kind of thing. And then at safety, I keep going back to Jeremy Chin, who is 76 on the list. And in the write-up Greg has, if Chin had been a free agent 2 years ago, he would have ranked in the top 30. But Jeremy Chin was someone who I think the Eagles had interest in.
You have been.
On
I
the
mean,
trade
if the
market last
Eagles
year.
don't sign Jeremy Chin, it's gonna be like you're gonna turn off all the lights and light a candle in your house as a vigil, because you have been pounding this Jeremy Chin to the Eagles thing for like 3 years now.
Well, yeah, the one thing I'll say is I don't know what Vic Fangio thinks about him, right? Like I haven't spoke. So I do think Vic Fangio is going to have a heavy say in personnel. And actually, there was a question today. I apologize if was it Dave Zangaro? I couldn't see on the other side. And who asked the question, is Vic Fangio going to have a heavier say in personnel?
That was a good question.
Howie's like, he thinks he will, right? Or something like that. Or he wants to or expects to, something like that. Right. So I do think, I don't know what he thinks of Jeremy Chin, but I do know in that front office, that's a player that they've thought highly of going back to the draft, going back to the trade market, and it hasn't materialized. He was injured last year, but maybe that's a Roddy McLeod type where
you have so much riding on this. If they sign Jeremy Chin, you get to do a total victory lap. Like that is a celebration for you. That is way more impressive than pretending like you predicted the Eagles were going to draft Nolan Smith with their second first-round pick. If they don't sign Jeremy Chin, I'm worried about you.
No, don't be, because I'm saying I don't know Vic Fangio's evaluation. But if they did sign him, there would not be a victory lap. You know what there would be? It would be Barry Sanders handing the ball to the official. Act like you've been there before.
Well, right? Please, come on. How could you say that while you also do the Nolan Smith BS?
I mean, we're not going to relitigate that. Okay. I think the flags have been planted on that, and it's up to the audience to decide
one of
which
them
side
is
of history they want to be on. Okay. You know what? I am not going to fight fire with fire. There was a comment the other day that when Bo teases Zach, he just like smiles and moves on, and that's why Bo keeps doing it, because he knows Zach won't push back. Hey, maybe they psychoanalyzed me well, because I'm not pushing back. I'm just gonna smile and move on.
Okay. The salary cap.
Yes.
Did you get the sense that this changed their operating procedure at all?
Well, I think they were pleasantly surprised by the increase here. I don't think it necessarily changed their operating procedure. I don't think they're going to spend for the sake of it, but I do think that they know that whatever their internal projections were, I think this might have been higher than their internal projections, and so they have a little more money to spend. Now, as we discussed on the show yesterday, and you astutely pointed out, and I agree with, everyone has more money to spend. So what this means is that it's not as if like they found $5 in their pocket and no one else has $5, right? Everyone else found that $5 in their pocket. So everyone has that $5 to spend on whatever, toy that they want to get at Five Below.
But not everybody is as good at spending $5 as they are.
And so that's where they're probably excited about
some
it.
Of those teams
is that like
put those $5 in their pocket?
Sure, yeah, and some of those teams are gonna, spend those spend that $5 to pay down last year's $5 debt, right? And so, I do think that they have more flexibility, and I think they'll try to respond accordingly. So I think it's one of those things that they're happy about, but I don't think it necessarily changes their offseason plans as much as it gives them a little more flexibility to do what they wanted to do this offseason.
All right. Anything else from Howie that you would like to discuss?
Let me scan through this here, because actually the transcript came while we were here.
Just like Julio Jones.
So let me see here. Yeah, so the aberration question. Look, I talked about that after the show when the press conference came up, and because I thought that was an important quote from Howie in the end of the season press conference, and it was the last question, so I couldn't get a follow up. But he says you don't want to overreact to an aberration, and I think that I am curious, and he didn't really answer it. I said, as you analyze it, do you view the last few weeks of the season as an aberration? And he said, quote, I don't know that I think about it other than How do we improve? How do we get better as quickly as we can? How do we put our resources in the right position? How do we make good decisions after good decisions? Certainly, we weren't good enough. I think luckily that we've gotten to a point where the standard here is trying to compete for championships. I don't need to read the whole quote, but yeah, I don't think their big takeaway from last season is this is a team that's in trouble. I think that they view it as there is top flight offensive personnel, that there's top flight personnel on offense. There's holes on defense that they can rectify. I don't think they view it like the wheels are falling off this roster. And perhaps they should. It's interesting. No one is kind of getting to the bottom of like what went wrong. And it's a good, trust me, it's not for a lack of asking. And everyone wants there to be like one thing. And it could be a million little things, right? That all added up. And they got the crap kicked out. By the way, I owe a mea culpa for you.
To me?
Yes, to you.
All right,
in the probably a little late to do this now, but I am, and for our audience, I am sorry. I apologize for the amount of times that I've cursed on this show. And I bring this up because to me, I'm like, you should speak organically. This might be how I speak. I'd listened to, and I'm not, I don't say this in a bad way. I love this show, but I listened to the Kelce podcast with my son in the car the other day. We were going to the Sixers game and I had the Kelce podcast on, and, there were some F-bombs thrown in, S-bombs, and Reed said, they said a bad word. And I said, I'm sorry, should I turn it off? And he said, don't worry, I won't tell mom. And so,
I love that.
Yeah, but yeah, I realize now that it's not like our viewers and listeners virgin ears, right? It's more, you might be listening while you have a kid in the backseat of the car.
Of course,
I've never.
We've long said this show is for the families.
Yeah, but I didn't
you
totally
took
put that together. I gotta say, I didn't totally put that together because I had never listened to a podcast with my kids in the car. Typically, like, we have the Disney music or whatever music they're listening to, right? But my son's getting into sports. He's into the Kelces. I said, what do you want to listen to? And he said, let's listen to a podcast. And I said, oh, okay. And then if he initially said the PHLY podcast, I already listened to the show. And so then I said, how about the Kelce podcast? Oh, he got really excited. And I was explaining to him, and then it was a great interview with Chris Long and Bo Allen.
Very good interview.
Yeah. But once he hears
did that interview give you more of a lean towards Kelce retiring? It did for me.
It did. Yes, it did. I think, and I think even the way they answered the question, like they spoke to him, I think it's like they know this is coming too. Yeah. So
that's how it felt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you don't have to if it really strikes you as necessary, you can do it. But I think a conscious effort to decrease the cursing is okay, and we'll leave the mistress talk and cum jokes in just for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says.
I'm not gonna push back on I'm just gonna let that one fly. So
I see a lot of complaints in the chat about how many questions were asked by Colts people and about Kirby Smart, and just to explain how that happens, the podium, the Eagles reporters are all off to the side doing something before the press conference, and then we all make our way to the podium, and there are people who are just camped out dead center. And so is it, if I were an Eagles reporter, would I be sitting in the middle trying to get a question when there are 10 beat writers around me trying to ask their own questions about a team I don't cover? Probably not, but respect the game. They're there to do their own job. So that's how that happens.
Can't push back on you. You did this with Gannon's press conference last year, right? I did it with Peterson today, right? I mean, look, everyone's got a job.
Yes, I think there is
I
an art to it,
okay.
there's I think first, my approach to it is either you do it like the very first question to get it out of the way, or you make sure that everybody who actually covers the team has gotten their question in, and the press conference is like trailing off, and then you get in there.
I agree with you there, and that's what I did for full disclosure. That's what I did in the Jacksonville press conference. I waited until the Trevor Lawrence questions came up and that kind of thing. In the defense of the Colts reporter and the Georgia reporter and whoever it may be,
they've got a job to do.
There are Eagles reporters who literally who were trying to get, I was trying to get more questions in. There were Eagles reporters who didn't get the questions that they wanted in. It's the nature of the beast here. I wish we had more time with these guys. I wish we had more time on the side with them. Like I get it. It's that there's a lot to ask. We all make the investment to come out here. Everyone has a job to do. And what I try to be empathetic. If you're a Georgia reporter and you flew up here for the combine and your boss is expecting you to deliver this story, you can't be like, well,
gotta do what you gotta do.
The Eagles reporters, right? Yeah, you got to get your question in, right? And the Eagles fans might not like that. I
think that's all fair. I think that's all fair.
Yeah, I've also received like questions about this. Why were you asking about topic X, topic? Like, just because something is discussed on talk radio or on social media does not necessarily mean like it needs commentary from. It's also up to us to ascertain what is like worthy of
it's your job. You're only going to get, at most 3 questions in, right?
Yeah.
It's your job to decide what are the most important questions to be asked. Yeah. And so, you don't need to ask about some nonsense report that's, stupid on its face.
Yes, exactly. And there's stuff that like we can, lend context to, right? That,
sure.
And we have conversations with people all the time. Like, even if it's not in the televised interview, that it kind of shapes our perspective and shapes our comments. And I do hope that our audience is nuanced enough to know that when we speak about something, we're often not picking it out of thin air. It's based on, like if I go to a certain place, if I don't go to a certain place, it might be because I've had conversations with people saying like, yeah, there's something here or there's nothing there. And sometimes we don't want to give oxygen to something that we know not to be true.
Like Jeremy Chin. Print the
that's
jerseys
more speculation.
Now. Buy it at the pro shop.
Yeah, that's more speculation than anything else. But like the Craig Carton stuff, right? Like, look, I'm the first one to admit that we're all operating with an information deficit. Like, we don't know everything that goes on in a locker room, right? But
we don't know.
We also
a fifth of, 2% of what goes on in the locker room.
Yeah, but like, just because someone says something on TV doesn't mean we have to say like, what's your response to this ambiguous report about such and such, right? Yeah.
All right. Now that you have the transcript up, anything else to go over from Howie?
Let's see here. So the Jalen Hurts question, we talked about that. The rookie stuff, that was a good question from you. When he was talking about upgrading on defense, the top priority, he mentioned that they want to get better at all areas. They're obviously they're not going to prioritize defensive tackle. They have young defensive tackles, right? Let's see, Shane Steichen, Nolan Smith heading into year 2. He said Nolan Smith played well in the playoff game. Did you feel Nolan Smith played well in the playoff game?
Certainly didn't remember that if he did, but
yeah. He says that's someone that he has all the tools. He has the right mentality. He's got to go and show it. And the indication was that he needs an opportunity to do it. At running back, he said that they're talented players on the free agent market. They're guys in their own team. Talented players end up getting paid. And everyone has a value that they place on players, that they'll see how this thing shakes out. I said last week, the Eagles are probably going to let the market come to them. The Eagles are not going to set the market at running back. It's simply not something they're going to do, but they like to.
So they did it last year with Rashad Penny. and Boston Scott
setting
on
the
the
market.
first day of free agency. It was wild.
No, but they didn't set the market, right? I mean, they gave Rashad Penny a deal that setting the market's the Miles Sanders deal, right? Like you're paying, the market came to them with Rashad Penny. Maybe not Boston Scott. Like Rashad Penny didn't get anything from that. It didn't play. So let me see here. Given Vic Fangio's, they took out the part of the transcript about Vic wants to say.
That's funny.
Yeah, Devontae Smith. Okay, so this is reading between the lines. This was a question, I believe, from Olivia Reiner. Does a great job at the Inquirer. Quote, Devontae is an incredible person, incredible player, obviously homegrown and young guy. Without getting into the specifics, those are the guys you don't really want to leave. We have discussed this before, that they're going to prioritize keeping Devontae. They have a track record of not letting their outstanding draft picks leave. They'll more than willing to let their bad draft picks leave. Like they do a better job than maybe I would do if I was a GM or some other GMs that I've covered at not compounding a problem with a problem, right? Like I might be too attached to a player and say, all right, change of scenery, this kind of thing. It's why I love these former first-round picks in free agency. I think they cut their losses better than some other GMs, but Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce, the reason these guys have stayed here is because they prioritize keeping the guys who are really good that they signed. And then the Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelce,
let me ask you a question about that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, we already talked about that.
We already talked about that. Yep.
How good of a job, if let's say Olivia keeps racking up these Pennsylvania Sports Writer of the Year awards, let's say she gets to like 5 in a row. Okay. How good, how many would she have to win before the paper changes its name to the Inquirer?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to happen because it's literally, you're an inquirer for Philadelphia. You inquire about Philadelphia. So, yeah, that would not change.
At some point, she could get big enough to be bigger, to be the face of the paper. What if she wins 15 in a row? The Inquirer.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think she could win 15 in a row. I think there's a better chance that she's elsewhere before she wins 15 in a row, right? I think if she wins 5 in a row.
But maybe that's how they keep her. Maybe that's their counter offer to keep her, is to change the name of the paper.
Yeah. Well, she does an awesome job, and credit to her. And look, they have an outstanding staff of young reporters. Alex Coffey wrote a terrific story recently. I'll give a shout out to her, and we know the job EJ does. So yeah, it's we had Josh Tolentino on the other day. Josh giving us good intel on Nakobe Dean. So they have really good young people.
Big takeaway here is you're calling Jeff McClain old.
Oh no! But I
mean, that's the takeaway. You basically said McClain is washed.
That's definitely, McClain is amazing. I say this but you're
not saying he's young.
No, I spoke. Okay, all right. Bo, you didn't have to bring me down this rabbit hole.
We all heard it.
Let me clarify this.
Jeff McClain in his walker, Jeff putzing around.
Jeff has had a huge effect on my career. I'm so proud of the work I did with Jeff, and Jeff is one of the best beat reporters in the country. I say that. I was talking about young reporters in particular because, and I will say this, there was a period of time.
He's not one of them, is your point.
No. And Jeff would agree with this. There's a period of time when the Inquirer had a void of young reporters, right? Because it was just the nature. There had been layoffs, and the way it was last one in, first one out. And then there was a hiring freeze for a period, and there were some people who left. I'll say when I was there, you can count on one hand the people in the 20s in the sports section, right? And they've done a good job in the past few years of bringing in some of these young talented people. So that's what I was trying to say. I mean, Jeff is awesome. Jeff knows that I think that.
But now he also knows you think he's old.
Well, no, Jeff's older than Olivia and EJ and Alex Coffey. I mean, Jeff would tell you the same thing. There's someone said, "Don't take his bait. Stop taking." Threat 11 Midnight says, "Stop taking the bait." You can't compliment someone without
driving 15 miles an hour on the highway to work.
No, Jeff does not drive 15 miles per hour. Jeff would say, I'm the one between the two of us who drives 15 miles per hour. We've had a lot of drives together, and between the two of us, I'm the slower driver.
You're listening to big band music?
I'm listening to podcasts that have the F word in
it. Yeah. All right. Anything else that we should talk about, Zach?
No, that I just want to reinforce, and I'm going to have some like quotes from today up on allphly.com, but then I'm also going to, at the end of the week, kind of have some overriding thoughts and like takeaways from my week in Indy. And one of the things that I would kind of reinforce is that I do think they're going to be active in free agency. And I do think that it's not going to be for your 1 year Band-Aids. I think they're going to try to make a splash. And the splash might not be a L'Jarius Sneed or a Jalen Johnson where you're paying a guy, 15, 20 million. But a splash might very well be a starter at a starter at two levels of the defense, right? And that they think can be part of the 2024 defense and the 2025 and 2026 defense. I also think, as much as I expect the Eagles to upgrade the number 3 wide receiver this offseason, I think there's a better chance of that coming in the draft. I think they've invested a lot of money in wide receiver, unless there's a bargain. I don't think they're going to be in the market for like a Hollywood Brown or someone like that. That would really surprise me. Yeah.
You've been pounding the Darnell Mooney train, though.
Yeah, but even Darnell Mooney might be out of their price range. I think that there's a better chance that they draft
I would think so.
a wide receiver or a tight end, unless the market comes to them. I think the money that they spend is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. And I think they do realize that they needed to be better personnel-wise on defense.
Okay. Last thing we should say, because you asked the question about yesterday, what is our time like here in Indy? We should let the listeners know we had a chance to have a lovely dinner last night with Marissa. And awesome. Boy, is the feud between Marissa and Julia just heating up. I mean,
no, don't create feuds, please. Don't create feuds. Yeah, it's like if Marissa is an amazing producer. Joey is an amazing producer. Let's let them. What's the expression? Now it's
time to find out which one's a better boxer.
No, comparison is the thief of joy, right? So let's not compare. Let's just appreciate the fact that you and I hit the jackpot with 2 producers.
Well said. Yeah, we had a lovely dinner.
Yeah, it was great seeing her.
Yeah, good time. So made the trip to Indianapolis worth it, as far as I'm concerned, Zach.
Well, that was a highlight of yesterday, but
you're gonna do this. I knew you were gonna do this.
Yeah, look, Marissa's amazing. She knows that. But like, if I came to Indianapolis on the company's dime, and I'm producing 2 shows here, plus shows when we get back with information from here, and 2 or 3 articles from here, and I said that the highlight was nothing to do with work, that wouldn't be productive.
Productive's got nothing to do with it. We're talking about your personal opinion. Absolutely, that was the highlight of the trip to Indianapolis, as far as I'm concerned. I'm here because it's my job. That was the highlight.
Yeah. Okay.
Marissa knows that, and now she knows who appreciates her time more.
No, it was awesome seeing Marissa.
All right. Well, I look forward to talking tomorrow about whatever shenanigans we get into tonight, Zach. That will do it for this episode of the PHLY Eagles podcast at the Combine. Some discussion in the chat. Apparently, this is not an original bit, which I did not know, and so maybe I'll, if it's not original, then I'm going to probably cast it aside. So this could be the last Combine episode. But we are back tomorrow at noon from Radio Row, and then back on Thursday and Friday in studio in Philadelphia at noon as well. Stay tuned to allphly.com for what we've got cooking the rest of the week. And for Zach and Julia, We thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Talk to you tomorrow. And as always, by the way, Zach is working on the world's first book on leadership. You can check out that next spring.
Oh, wait. There's one other thing we have to say. Thank you for putting this in the chat. The PHLY locker. Yes. Do you want me to say
locker, 30% off.
Yeah.
Please. 30% off until Wednesday. 30% off everything at the PHLY locker. Zach, that guy who's writing that leadership book, is also known for his fashion sense. If you want to look like Zach Berman, you can do it by hitting up the PHLY locker. 30% off through Wednesday. Thank you for the reminder, Provolone John. Now that will do it for this episode of the PHLY Eagles podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Talk to you tomorrow. And as always, we love you.
We all silly like the mayor.